But he that knew not, and did commit things worthy of stripes, shall be beaten with few stripes. For unto whomsoever much is given, of him shall be much required. And to whom men have committed much, of him they will ask the more. Luke 12:48. Welcome once again to the GapFillers podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Michael Bradford. This is episode number 3. Today's theme is responsibility. But first, let me mention that there will be a meeting at the state capitol to discuss the Sunbridge annexation as discussed in the last podcast. This will be just going over a bunch of other stuff, hearing people out, delegations and all that. But if you're interested in viewing it, that will be on the Florida channel. You can view it at the floridachannel.org. It's basically a C-SPAN of sorts for state and local politics. I highly recommend that if you're interested in the more nitty-gritty about state politics, the Florida channel is a good resource. A lot of boring stuff, but if you have some time or you have an interest that is being discussed in the Florida legislature, or if you just want to know what's going on with the people that you elect, that's a good place to start. It's funded by the state legislatures, so do with that what you will. But it's not going to be as politically biased as a major news site or even a local channel. So let's get started. Responsibility. It's the real R word in politics. Nobody wants to ever say that word. Everyone always wants to shift blame to somebody else. And blame is really what they want to shift, not actual responsibility. They want the control and they want the freedom, but they don't want the blame that goes with it. It's the stick that goes with the carrot of freedom. I myself have caught myself doing this before, trying to defend politicians that I like and against politicians that I don't like. This is probably one of the best reasons I like having a couple of friends, at least, not all my friends, just a couple, that will keep me honest. They're politically antagonistic to what I believe. However, they'll call you out on stuff where you are shifting responsibility, and it makes you reanalyze what you're actually defending. You're not supposed to be defending politicians because politicians are people. If you think politicians are the answer to your problems, you're also mistaken. Very, very mistaken. If you think Trump, I supported Trump this time around because he had a few things that I really loved, and Kamala really had some really bad things I really hated. I mean, most of the Democrats do, but Trump was at least open to shifting his point of view as opposed to his first term. Getting rid of the income tax is a huge one. Anyways, I digress on that. I'm not going to go into that today. That's for another podcast. But what I really want to focus on is not thinking that Trump is going to be the guy that fixes all of your problems, or if Harris got in, that the world is going to end. Now, it's our responsibility to take action where action is needed, but the idea that Trump is going to fix your woes, that is wrong. He shouldn't have the power to fix all your woes. The power remains within your responsibility. There's a saying that goes, the people get the leader they deserve. If you're not going to be responsible for your own actions and always looking for a politician to be that savior, you're never going to get it. Especially in a democracy, if you're not willing to take control, if you're not willing to take responsibility for your own actions, then you can't depend on some politician to be able to fix that. If they're able to fix it, they're a tyrant, and they're even less likely to fix it. And that's the whole reason why we have a decentralized, or at least should have a decentralized government, is to break down the power centralization all the way down to the individual. family, state, or city, state, neighborhood even, all the way up to the federal government. The only thing the government should be able to control is defense and interstate commerce, in disputes and stuff like that. That's the way that they really should be set up. However, it's much easier to control 350 million people with a centralized government than it is a decentralized government. A decentralized government is kind of like herding cats. If you're familiar with any of the politicians on the libertarian side of politics, it is oftentimes herding cats because everybody has their own view on what libertarians are. The famous saying is, "You're not really a libertarian. The only true libertarian is me." And especially the ANCAPs, they love that. But if you're not willing to take responsibility, at the end of the day, somebody will take the control that goes with it. I think back to in third grade. We used to have these third grade 3-week report cards of sorts that go out, and your parent had to sign them, and so your parents got to see everything that was on your major grades that got recorded, and they had to sign off on them. And that's the first time I ever remember hearing responsibility. Oh man, I hated that word when I was little, because when you're young, when you're first born, you have absolutely zero responsibility. But as you grow, you should take on more and more. And that's really the true meaning of what it is to be an adult and to be a man of sorts, is to be responsible, take on the maximum responsibility you can bear. In doing so, you'll find meaning, and you'll be less likely to be caught in nihilism. There's stress that goes along with responsibility, of course, but there's freedom also. There's a correlation between the two. My history teacher, this is a common thing that all of our students remember from this one history teacher, is freedom demands responsibility. It is the cornerstone of what it means to be an American, really, is to take on the maximum responsibility in order to have maximum freedom. But with that freedom also comes the consequences of those actions. And if you're not willing to take those consequences, you're gonna give up those freedoms. If you're not willing to fail financially, and you're going to be dependent on somebody else financially, you're going to give up a certain amount of freedom that goes with it, whether that be the government or mom and dad. And if you're under their financial dependency, you're going to give up some freedom, and you rightly should. Even if they don't require it, there's certain amounts of liberty that you're going to give up by nature. To quote the verse that started off this podcast, "To whom much is given, much it will be required." It is the coefficient that goes along with responsibility. The most frustrating thing, to get it back to politics, about most politicians, especially presidents, is they try to shift blame. Everybody tries to shift blame to everybody. That does not make it right, but it is the nature of human power and responsibility that if you're going to be in power, you're going to have the blame that goes with it. Men, you're responsible for your families. Women, you're responsible for your children. Pastors are responsible for their church. Mayors are responsible for their cities. Presidents are responsible for their country. So over the next 4 years, let's make sure that we are taking responsibility for what we have been given stewardship of, and not looking to a president to fix our own lives. So on that note, let's move on to our topics for the week. The biggest story this week is still the California wildfires that are raging. They have burned over 3 times of the square mileage of Manhattan. And the blame game still goes on. Trump blames Newsom blames climate change, Bass blames firefighters blame Bass. But at the end of the day, everyone, besides Trump, is responsible for their own actions or inaction, for that matter, in preparing for these fires. Trump had been calling them out for years now, all the way back in 2016, I think it was, where he rake the leaves, you gotta rake the leaves, all that. But between gum trees introduced all the way back, when California first became or was being settled for that matter by Americans. Now there have been major winds, but that's also been caused by the fire. And people have recorded when Hamburg was being bombed, hurricane force winds, because they create a low pressure as fires rage and it gets so big. They create their own sustaining fuel source of oxygen and being able to spread. I also don't give much credence to the climate change aspect of that. Although I'm all for being a good steward of the earth, climate change is their buzzword and they're really the religion of the left. It's their blame for everything. It's their way of not taking accountability for their own actions or reason to give them more power. Oh yeah, this is climate change. Give me more power. Let me take more control. And as you've seen, they're barely competent to control what they have power over already, let alone what's not under their own power. Hence the blame on climate change. There was a time where I, in college, had entered a contest. It was a big ideas contest, Blackstone, at UCF. I created a business model to sequester carbon out of the atmosphere. I won. I won $1,000. I was very pleased with myself. But what ended up happening is I went to see if it was a logical, idea to carry through into an actual business and develop it further. And I approached this biopharmaceutical mentor. He was, he had been in that field and invented something, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe I can, talk to this guy. But halfway through, I had mentioned through our conversation, that this was like a 45-minute conversation, but halfway through, I mentioned that I don't believe climate change is real. I don't believe that at the ultimate end of everything economically, we should abandon all fossil fuels in order to reduce carbon dioxide. Now, I think we should reduce carbon dioxide, and this business idea was one way to do it. But at the end of the day, I don't believe it's anything that we're going to be able to do as Americans or the Europeans even, because they're pretty much irrelevant already. China and India are going to be where all the pollution is coming from for the past decade now. They're growing at an exponential rate. Anyways, I digress. The idea was, though, is that I had mentioned halfway through that I don't believe in climate change, and he dropped all pretenses of thinking after that. He was like, okay, well, it is real, and it was like I committed sacrilege, blasphemy against him. It was, but it is. I'm like, oh, I don't care if it is or not. The idea is that I want people to leave me alone. Therefore, I'm going to fix their problem. But they don't want their problem fixed because it is their religion. It's their ideology. It's their reason not to take responsibility. It's this idea that, oh, if I blame climate control or climate change, I don't have to take responsibility for fuel prices being so high. Well, okay, well, why don't you, take more on the ground? Well, because of climate change. Well, you can make water from oil and stuff like that because, you use water, you can boil water and all of that with fuel. But at the end of the day, that's not what they want. They have an idea in their head and it's their religion. So I think they're not going to change. They're not going to change their mind as long as they have an incentive to not do it. And that's pretty much governmental power. It's also a values game. What do they value? They value fish not going extinct, possibly going extinct, over the lives of millions of people living in Los Angeles. But they also show that already with, homelessness and stuff like that. Homelessness is a completely different topic I don't want to get into right now. Really, I'm talking about home values and the lack of quantity of housing in Los Angeles as opposed to actual homelessness. Homelessness is more caused by drugs and stuff like that, especially in California than other places. But anyways, back to the topic. There's something to be said though, because this one is primarily, or it's odd because people are focusing more on this than they did on the fires in Hawaii on the island of Maui, where it pretty much wiped out half the island. And here we are 2 years later, little to nothing has been done besides send them a $700 FEMA check. It's odd that it's $700. What is that going to do for anybody? It's not even housing for like 2 weeks in a hotel. And some on the conspiratorial side will say that this is because, rich people and they're the lithium mines in North Carolina, so they're clearing the land. Yeah, which is all possible. But what I really want to get at is you never attribute to maliciousness what you can attribute to incompetence. You never the government can be either all powerful and a conspiratorial, counter, under society or whatever, or they're incompetent. They're not likely to be both. I mostly attribute it to human nature. Like I said, nobody wants to take blame or responsibility. Therefore, nothing gets done. This is where you need the good men to come in and take responsibility and lead and take charge, not through power and coerciveness, but through action. To take care of themselves, their family, and their community. Not to be a weight and drag everybody else down, but to be able to take what small power they do have, and it's great power, but when you compare it to the government, it's small. But to take what power they have and to take action, to prepare to take care of themselves. This is kind of why I'm really into survival of sorts, is because if the worst does happen, I want to be prepared to be able to not be a weight at the very least to the people around me. And at the most, be able to help others that aren't being able to fend for themselves. And that's most of the time ways that men find meaning in life. There's a story that during the Battle of Britain, you had these people, these men that would be they're basically paralyzed from whatever in their life, and suffering from some kind of mental disorder. But as soon as the bombs started falling, they found meaning in their life, and it actually caused them to leap into action. And you had mental patients that hadn't been, men of action in years, and here they are driving buses and finding meaning because there's an emergency. Therefore, you don't want to end up blaming the people of California, but they do have a responsibility to elect leaders that will protect them from fires, from crime, and we have the responsibility, as a nation, to elect leaders that will look out for our interests before the interests of other countries. And on that note, I think that's a good segue to our next topic, which is the Israel peace deal. Now, I can guarantee you that I will be critical of Trump where he deserves to be critical of. But there's a debate on right now who deserves the glory for the ending of the Israel conflict and the returning of the hostages. I will say, while Biden is in office, this kind of reminds me of the Iranian hostage crisis during Jimmy Carter's time, where right after, literally minutes, Reagan took office, the hostages that were being held in Iran were released. In this case, it was days before Trump took office. And I attribute this to a little bit of the fear that Trump is able to put into other countries around the world, that and it's really what the Democrats claim to fear is Trump being a lunatic of sorts. But sometimes that's exactly what you want in a leader. You want somebody who's just enough crazy to fend off the wolves without actually having to attack. So right now I find it very easy to give Trump the credit for that one instead of Biden. I know to the Democrats that's going to seem like that's just because you supported Trump. Well, this is why we supported Trump. To deal with foreign adversaries in a manner that's going to not allow them to be comfortable. Anyways, the last topic I do want to discuss, though, is Rick Scott introduced into in the Senate to make daylight savings time permanent. So there's a huge debate that I didn't actually know was really controversial until recently, that whether we should be on permanent daylight time or permanent standard time. Me personally, I love the idea of being on permanent daylight savings time. This would cause the light to be more during the nighttime, like towards the evening, as opposed to the morning. The opponents of daylight time, the standards, love the idea because there's a few psychos out there that love waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and having a daylight at 5, and they claim it's better for children's health. But children kids go to school. Okay, it's light. They get 15 minutes of light, and then they're stuck inside all day. And then they come home, and then it's dark. And so there's no time for daylight to get them anyways. However, if it was light during the evening, there would be a lot more chance, especially during the winter, for kids to be exposed to daylight, outside, and they're be able to play instead of being dark at 4 o'clock. It would also allow people to, do outdoor activities like, take care of their landscaping or anything like that, and anything that requires sunlight to do. So I personally love the idea of Rich Scott's permanent daylight savings time. But I'm sure there are a couple psychos out there that will disagree with me. Either way, I think we both can agree, though, that the changing of the times really has always seemed backwards to me. Have more daylight during the winter, front logged, as opposed to the summer. So have it kind of more evened out. Either way, I don't like the idea of switching. Nobody likes losing that hour of sleep, especially. So let me know in the comments which ones y'all would prefer. In fact, I think I'm going to make that the poll for the week. On that note, I think I'm going to wrap up for this week's episode. I hope everyone enjoys their extra long weekend if you get Martin Luther King Day off. Also, enjoy President Trump's inauguration. I hope to see you next week. If you'd like to follow me on X, I am at GapFillers 1776. And have a good week.